A young woman goes out for a jog through the woods while Sweet Dreams plays on her iPod. But in the middle of her morning routine, she sees a small porcelain figurine on a log. She stops and sees what it's doing here, but someone attacks her. She tries to wiggle her way out of the attacker's hold, but soon her screams turn silent. On the other hand, a handsome young detective called Nick Burkhart gets out of a store and shows off his new purchase to his friend and case partner, Hank Griffin. But their happiness turns sour as they receive a call about a crime scene in the woods. As Nick is sitting in the car, he sees that an attractive woman's face turns into a beast. He tries to shake off the feeling and sits in the car, but the image haunts him for the rest of the day. At the crime scene, they see a bloody arm separated while the rest of the body lies down the cliff. They also notice a pink Nike shoe which shows that the victim is a girl. Nick hears a noise, and he goes to examine where it is coming from. He sees the victim's iPod, and the same song is playing on it. He then sends it for evidence and identification of the victim. In the mud, they also find muddy prints, which indicate that the killer is a male and has specific boots. At the station, a perp's face changes again into a beast, and this time Nick is even more confused. But he gets a lead about the victim and quickly goes there to investigate. Nick and Hank meet the victim's roommate and quickly identify that the poor girl's name is Sylvie Oster, and she is a college student. However, it gets late, and the two cops call it a day and go home. Nick is supposed to propose to his girlfriend, Juliet, today. However, his plan fails when he sees a woman sitting at the table. He recognizes her as Aunt Marie quickly and hugs her tight. She whispers that they should talk, and they both go outside to have an important chat. There she brings up creatures Nick has been seeing, and he gets confused as to why he is seeing them. She then tells him that he is not human and they have a much more important role in society. However, she sees a car and takes out her knife, saying that he is here to kill her. Nick is even more confused now, but a man with a beast-like face called Hulda tries to attack Marie and Nick. Marie suddenly gets power and starts fighting Hulda while Nick also tries to save his aunt. However, Marie falls to the ground, but just as the beast is about to kill her, Nick shoots him. Hulda falls to the ground, leaving Marie in a very fragile state. In a weak voice, she tells Nick that his parents did not die in a crash, they were killed. She also gives him a locket and asks him to guard it with his life. Nick feels his whole life shift, but Marie faints and leaves him answerless. Later in the hospital, Marie finally gets stable and calls Nick. There she tells him that Nick and his ancestors are Grimm who brings stability to the world by capturing bad guys. Nick also has the power to see the real face of a person just as the creature loses control. A doctor comes in and says that Marie needs to rest now, and Nick leaves the place. He then examines the necklace and sees that it is actually a hidden key. He goes home but cannot sleep, so he makes a visit to his aunt's trailer and uses the key to open it. He sees piles of books, artifacts, and weapons that his aunt possessed and begins studying them. Later that night, Juliet comes to get him for bed and talks with him about his childhood. There it is revealed that Nick has stayed with his aunt ever since he was 12, and he is very attached to her. The next day, Hank informs that the guy who attacked Nick and Marie was a person from Chicago, but his motive for the attempt is still ambiguous. Nick is pretty shocked due to the previous night's events, and his boss says that he will have to clarify with the psychiatrist just in case. While Nick is busy understanding all the complications, a little girl with a red hoodie gets abducted by an anonymous man. The police get a complaint, and Nick, along with his partner, goes to investigate. Apparently, little Robin was supposed to go to her grandfather's house, but she never got there. Hank and Nick go the route to investigate and see that a path goes through the woods. They follow their instincts and move further into the woods to search for any clues. There, Hank finds a child's bag, and Nick, on the other hand, sees a man coming out of his house. Upon seeing Nick, the man's face changes into a wolf-like creature, but he quickly masks it. Nick runs after him and calls for backup because he believes that the creature has abducted the kid. However, the police do not find anything in his house and ask Nick to leave the gentleman alone. Nick cannot shake the feeling of discomfort with the guy, so he spies on him later that night. The man, in return, tackles him. Nick gets defensive, but the man, Monroe, asks him to lighten up. He then reveals that he is a bloodbat and gets scared of Nick because he is a Grimm. Nick says he won't harm him, and after a little back and forth, he says that a little girl got kidnapped. Monroe says that he has a pretty good sense of smell, and Nick asks him for help. Using his super senses, Monroe takes Nick inside a forest, where he locates a house. He says that the postman's scent is coming from there, but before Nick can go any further, Monroe gives Nick the wolfbane. Apparently, it is used to hide bodily scent so that the other creature cannot smell him. However, Monroe takes his leave and says he is afraid to go any further. Nick then calls his partner, Hank, to come as backup. Hank just wakes up disoriented but complies and goes to the forest. He asks Nick where he got the address, but Nick replies that he followed the boot prints they found earlier. They both follow to the house, where the postman opens the door for them. Hank looks at his feet, but the guy is not wearing any boots. They both enter his house and see that the postman is a pretty simple guy. Nick can feel something is not right, but since they have no proof, even after searching, they both leave. However, as they are leaving, Hank hears that the postman is singing Sweet Dreams, which was the same song that played on the victim's iPod earlier. He looks behind and sees that the suspect is watching them. And suddenly, the lights go out. They both forcefully enter the house, and in darkness, the postman attacks both of them. He tries to escape, but Hank shoots him, and Nick catches up to his injured body to ask for the kidnapped girl. However, the guy still does not reply and only says grim to Nick's face. In the house, Nick sees a pool of water gathering and lifts up the carpet to see a secret passageway. They both go downstairs and see the girl tied up and finally take her away from the hellhole. Later, Nick is sitting beside his aunt's hospital bed, waiting for her to wake up and give him answers. As he is in his thoughts, a nurse comes up and tries to inject something into Marie. Knox sees that she is not the nurse and tries to stop her, but in a hurry, she injects Nick with the injection. Nick falls to the ground with a grunt, and the mysterious woman runs out of the place. A young man and woman break the glass door and enter a luxurious house. They are not the owners, but they eat, drink, and dance in the abandoned house. They then shift toward the bedroom, where they both start having intimate movements with each other. But soon, the girl hears a voice, and they both hurriedly leave the place. The girl jumps down from the window, but the guy is stuck in the room. She then hears that her boyfriend is struggling against something and hears a scary growl. She gets scared and runs for her life. The next day, Nick leaves the hospital after the previous night's incident. The doctor informs him that he was injected with a dangerous toxin which could have paralyzed his lungs. Nick knows that the girl was not there to kill him, but his aunt, and he gets worried about her. In the precinct, Nick, Hank, and their captain Renard see the surveillance tape, but they cannot see the attacker's face. Nick has seen the woman, but with no hard proof, he cannot do anything. While he is still in thought, an officer comes up and says that a woman was arrested in a drunk driving case, and she claims someone killed her boyfriend. The two detectives go to the house with the woman, whose name is Gilda. They find that Agent Wu is already there upon the request of the owner of the house, Frank and Diane Rabe, who reported breaking and entering. The two find that Gilda and her boyfriend definitely stayed at the place and conclude that the guy must be at home. Hank, however, is very intrigued by the number of artifacts in the house. Back at the station, Nick gets a call from his aunt, who wants to speak to him. Marie explains that the Reapers belong to an organization that does not like Grims and are trained to kill them. She advises him not to let the Reapers find her trailer. Later, Nick joins Hank, who says that they need to check the Rabe estate again because there is a good chance Rocky, Gilda's boyfriend, is lost. As they reach the place, three boys enter with their motorcycles and greet the two cops. They are introduced as Barry Rabe and his two friends. However, as they are talking, Barry briefly transforms into his Jaegerbar form, and Nick quickly sees him. Meanwhile, the woman who attacked Nick meets with Captain Renard. Her name is Adaland, and she is somehow related to the captain. But their true intentions are not revealed there. On the other hand, Nick sees a similar artifact in his aunt's trailer as displayed on the Rabe's estate. Nick visits Monroe, who explains that the artifact is a bear claw used to disembowel victims in a Jaegerbar event called Row Hats. Nick realizes Barry's intentions and hurries to the station. Hank tells him that Barry lied about his whereabouts and he was at his house the previous night. The two cops also get to know that Gilda is on her way to the estate to get her boyfriend. Meanwhile, Gilda angrily marches up to Diane and points the gun at her. She asks where her boyfriend is, but Barry, in his Jaegerbar form, tackles her. Sometime later, Nick and Hank reach the place and advise them to stay cautious. When Hank goes to search for Gilda, Nick calls them out and says that he knows about Row Hats. Frank denies knowing anything, but he realizes that Diane is helping Barry. He teams up with Nick to find the couple in the forest. Meanwhile, Barry and his group of friends prepare for the hunt and release two humans into the wild. Nick and Frank somehow stop the hunt before Barry kills them both. As Nick is talking to Barry, Diane, in her full Jaegerbar form, tries to attack the cop, but she falls into a ditch that Barry himself previously made. Barry screams in agony, seeing his mother like this, but his regret is useless now. Later, paramedics are called, and Diane is taken to the hospital while Barry and his friends are arrested. Gilda and Rocky are also arrested for breaking and entering. However, Nick gets a call from Monroe, who says that he fought two creatures who tried to attack Marie. Nick hurries back to the hospital, but apparently, he is too late. Marie passes away after fighting the last attacker and using all her strength. Nick sees his last family member pass away in front of his eyes, and he feels lonelier than ever.